morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming today to this presentation, Beyond the Workbook, Creative Ways to Engage in DBT Skills Groups. My name is Dr. Kimberly Applewhite. I am the director of the Dialectical Behavior Therapy program here at Utah Center for Evidence-Based Treatment. And this is one of my favorite topics, so I'm super excited to get started. I'm also pleased to have with me one of my colleagues who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Rosa Waters, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a primary member of the DBT team here, and prior to my career as a therapist, I worked in education. So I'm really excited to incorporate some scholarship from the field of education into our presentation today.
Awesome. All right. I actually forgot who was doing this, so I will do it. This is the accuracy, utility, and risk statement. You also may have seen this when you signed up. We do DBT stuff, but we want you to study it before you implement it. But hopefully this will have some utility to you.
And we don't have any conflicts of interest to disclose, no commercial support, and we did use AI for the generation of our citations.
Be free, guys. Don't do it yourself. Awesome.
All right, so today we'll be starting with some mindfulness. We'll go over group format, DBT skills group format. We will spend some time defining successful engagement and what that looks like. We'll spend some time talking about considerations for inclusive groups and developmentally appropriate groups, other learning considerations. Kimberly's going to spend some time sharing some strategies, and finally we'll have time for Q&A.
Okay, we will be using Slido today to interact during the presentation. So if you're not familiar, it's just an online interactive engagement platform. Imagine that, using engagement in a presentation about engagement. So if you want to join along with us, you can visit on your phone, hopefully, slido.com, and then when it asks for the code, put in DBT BTW, or you can use your phone to scan the QR code on the screen. So you can use the Q&A for questions. That's a great place to put them in the Zoom Q&A section. But throughout the presentation, we may be asking questions and asking you to interact with us. The Zoom webinar format is a new one for UCEBT. And so we don't have all the same features of breakout rooms and things like that, and so we're really going to be depending on Slido today for audience participation. So as many of you as can, please scan this code for participation throughout. Okay, so for mindfulness today is kind of a throwback to when I was first learning DBT. So imagine if an activity like this were the foundation for how you were exposed to DBT. This is Charles Swenson, who's a psychiatrist, in the Northeast area, standing by Marsha Linehan, the developer of DBT, and a band of therapists, presumably, who came together form a group called Synthesis because they're DBT nerds. So anyway, we'd love for you all to participate. I will be participating, though I can prove it because my microphone will be unmuted. I'm going to take the rest of you's word for it. Rose is going to put the lyrics to the mindfulness activity in the chat so you can sing along with us. Okay, here we go. We have a raised hand. Sarah, can you put in the chat? I'm not put in the chat, Sarah, if you have a question or comment. And everybody else put in the Slido, if you can, what thoughts, reflections you have, or you can put them in the chat too. We are observing. Couldn't stop laughing. I'm into it. Oh, that's eventful, Sarah. Anyway, what reflections do you notice? I will say that when I first was learning, they actually didn't do this song. They did one to the tune of "Do You Hear the People Sing," which was an adventure. I am trying to figure out why. Oh, here we go. People are typing. Oh, there's a question in the chat. Is singing considered a mindfulness activity? I will reflect on that. Positive judgments. Thanks, Rhonda. So yeah, if y'all type on the screen, I mean, everybody can see the chat, I suppose, but it is easier for everyone to see, especially those who are gonna watch later. They will all see your thoughts if you put them in the Slido. So anyway, you're free to choose to use it or not. People are saying that was a fun, different perspective. Cool. So to answer Elijah's question, oh wait, all I had to do was click. Oh man, I love life. Give me 1 second. Okay, wait. I'm gonna stop share for a second because I had too many windows up and then I lost the presentation. And while I'm pulling it back up, I'm gonna answer Elijah's question, which is singing considered mindfulness? And to evaluate that, I would say, what is mindfulness principally? So in DBT, the principles are, the what skills of observe, describe, and participate, and also
safe in our building they work.
Doing what works. And so I would consider singing to be an example of participate mindfulness, where the goal would be kind of open-minded presentation and attunement to the moment. Now, a lot of times when I do karaoke for mindfulness activity, it takes a while, or people report that it takes a while to get into the spirit of fully participating, because they're like, oh, this is a little bit embarrassing though. And even today, being too minded on like, are the lyrics in the chat? Do I have it?
You already know
like,
the drill.
Now all my
Close your eyes,
videos that
drop
I'm
your
going to
phone.
show
We're
you
not
are
going back.
playing, and I'm like feeling feelings of embarrassment. So all kinds of things were going through my mind even today, trying to pull this up. But after a while, the goal would be to get into a flow state. Sometimes to clients, I explain this as like in the movie Soul by Pixar, when the person is so into his jazz playing that he goes to the other plane where the jazz playing souls are, I suppose. And so, yeah, singing is a great way to engage people in mindfulness. The activity was based on, I enjoyed doing participate mindfulness, but I also gave a similar presentation at a different conference. And I started with dance along to Blind Melon's No Rain, and the feedback I got was that that was too active for 8 o'clock in the morning. So anyway, some people will enjoy things, some people won't, but it is about making it engaging. So thank you, people, for participating. And it is a good point, especially for engaging different learning styles, to have a familiar tune. So part of the downside of my advancing age is that some of the songs I like are less relevant, but many people who grew up in this country or were socialized in elementary schools will know like nursery rhymes. So in the manual, it says mindfulness and mindfulness skills can be practiced anytime, anywhere, while doing anything. Intentionally paying attention to the moment without judging it or holding on to it is all that is needed. So I think that speaks for itself, and especially it's important as group leaders to model that mindfulness can be practiced all kinds of ways. So imagine only doing sort of like the meditative sort of mindfulness activities and then telling people that mindfulness is anything. So we want to try and diversify our experiences as much as possible. And if karaoke doesn't work for you, then try something else that might be engaging. Okay, I just wanted to give an overview of the group format in case people are newer to leading DBT skills groups and are less familiar. I also wanted to clarify that our focus today is on standard DBT groups. So some of you who have attended our CE events before may know that here at UCBT we have two offerings with dialectical behavior therapy in the name. We have DBT standard, and we also have radically open dialectical behavior therapy, which was designed by Thomas Lynch to focus on over-controlled clients. If you want more information about that, we have a great CE that you can watch for free on our YouTube channel about RODBT versus DBT. So I just wanted to make that clear. Today we're talking about our DBT standard groups. Some of the teaching strategies for RO groups might be different. So in DBT skills groups, it's one of the 4 modes in a comprehensive DBT program. And the goal of skills group as a mode is to increase client capacity for change. So we have consultation groups or for our therapist capacity. We have individual therapy to track goals and motivation that way. And we have phone coaching to increase skills generalization. And so this is to increase the capacity for change. Originally, group was standardized for 2.5 hours, which may seem like a long time. You can be within the evidence base at a range of 1 hour and 45 minutes to 2.5 hours. Many people in an outpatient setting will shoot for 2. Some people who are in different settings where there's time constraints, billing constraints might shoot for 1 hour. And so, but the content was standardized for 2.5 hours of didactic content. The first half of group would consist of a mindfulness activity and homework review from the previous week. We want to see how people have practiced skills. And then the second half of group would include the skills lesson for that day, a homework assignment, and then some kind of wind down activity. It can be formal, it can be informal. And standard practice would dictate 2 leaders so it can be more fun. There are some different adaptations in different DBT formats. For example, with DBT-A, instead of just having one individual, we have adolescents and their families all learning skills. And there's different set of skills that we teach to adolescent and families, but just having more people in the room introduces complications of different learning styles and drama, for lack of a better word. In DBT for children, which is an offering at our center, skills group is done in the context of families, so we don't have family groups because of the ranging developmental ages of children 7 to 12, but skills are taught within the family, so it can have even siblings or other caregivers learning skills. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Rosa, who's going to talk about defining successful engagement.
All right, so we're gonna start with another Slido. So Kimberly, could you advance to the next slide? What does an engaged DBT skills group feel like? Sort of a reflection. And this could be from your stance as a leader or an observer or a client. Could you type in or even in the chat offer some thoughts on this question? Active, willingness. People are doing homework, yeah. Looking at presenters, commenting, applying skills group to their lives, doing the homework. They aren't checking the clock watching, yep. Engaging, giving, sense of safety. Yeah, lots of other comments coming in. Volunteering thoughts, community. All right. Thanks for participating. I want to share a quick anecdote, and that is that I did grad school in Hawaii, and one of my practicum activities was leading mindfulness classes for kapuna, which is the term for older adults in Hawaii. So one day we thought we had created this really cool, innovative audio-based mindfulness game where you basically listen to nature sounds and then have our audience, we had our audience guess the sound. So is that a thunderstorm or is it a waterfall? And the activity really flopped. Like maybe one or two of the participants in this large room were kind of, raising their hand and engaging. So the following week, we tried something different and we played music that was sort of appropriate for when the kapuna, the older adults, were growing up. And engagement felt totally different that week. It was palpable. We had participants in the room kind of singing and swaying and engaging fully. So that's sort of what an engaged group looks like to me. And thank you guys for continuing to send in some thoughts in the chat. All right, so in the next slide, we're gonna talk a little bit about what education literature has to say about engagement. So Barkley and Major are two scholars who write a lot about active and collaborative learning, especially in the college setting. And they define engagement as having 3 dimensions. So cognitive being the extent to which students are spending mental effort on learning, behavioral being the extent to which students are making active responses to the learning, and affective, the level of students' investment and their emotional reactions to the learning. So there are some examples in the right-hand column of what this might look like, but just to highlight a few: being invested, showing up, caring about what we're talking about, interest, enthusiasm, motivation. And in the next slide, we're going to build on this. So Marzano and Pickering, and Marzano is really frequently cited in practitioner literature. They offer ways in which teachers can deliberately plan to increase engagement in classrooms. So basically, they suggest that we step in the mindsets of our students and ask 4 questions. How might the student feel? Is the student interested? Is the content important? And does the student feel like they can do this? Is there self-efficacy? So the first 2 questions are related to short-term attention, and the second 2 are more so related to longer-term engagement. So I'm going to go through and provide some examples of how teachers may step into the shoes of their learners in answering these questions. And as I do that, I'm going to ask that you think about how your clients and group might respond affirmatively to these questions and what you can do as the group leader to promote affirmative answers. So for how do I feel, emotions, right? Marzano and Pickering suggest we consider perceptions of acceptance, energy levels of students, and work to foster a positive relationship with the teacher. So for DBT groups, I think a bit about, do clients feel safe and welcome and understood? What's the therapeutic relationship like? What's the group alliance like? The next question, am I interested? So the two authors here suggest game-like activities, initiating friendly controversy, using unusual information or highly topical current events, and using effective questioning strategies, which we'll get to a little later on. So for groups, maybe you're thinking about, oh, do my participants or my clients find the material to be relevant? Are my group leaders holding my attention? So next is this important or perceived importance. Our authors here think about how the learning material relates to student goals, are tasks cognitively complex, and does the material have real-world applications? And when I think about DBT groups, I'm thinking a little bit about how do skills groups help me build a life worth living? And then finally, can I do this? And this is where teachers in educational settings are asked to instill hope, provide support, check for understanding, and just overall kind of encourage self-efficacy. So we might do some similar things like instill hope and check for understanding, but also ask, how can I apply these skills to my own life? All right, so next slide, please, Kimberly. So now we're going to get back to DBT related literature. So Penderson, and there are two Pendersons we're referring to here, Lane Penderson and Courtney Sidwell Penderson, in their expanded DBT skills training manual, offer some teaching suggestions, and we'll go over this pretty quickly. But they suggest interactive learning, which includes things like expanding on the content, generating examples, and leaving space for clients to jump in. And I'll just share that two of my colleagues who run an entirely virtual group do this by asking participants to leave their mics on, which can be a little bit scary at times, but it offers room for spontaneous sharing and client-to-client feedback. Socratic questioning is next, so that's asking open-ended questions, and this can get clients to sort of answer their own questions by themselves. So examples include, why did you say that? Or tell me more. Group presentation and discussion includes clients teaching each other. In-group experiential learning we'll get to in a moment, but mindfulness is a prime example of this. Role plays will be a little later in our presentation. Modeling, we do this in our group sometimes by modeling missing links when we as group leaders haven't done our homework. Mixing in audio, video, and other media, and then behavioral homework. And I know that someone chatted that in the Slido question previously, just checking to make sure everyone's done their homework. Penderson, they say that cookie cutter answers bring cookie cutter results. So this is where we have opportunity to sort of customize our groups a bit, yes, while maintaining adherence, but to who's in the room. All right, so on the next slide, we're going to talk about we're going to go into validation, actually. So this is an example of incorporating audio visual materials into teaching a validation. All right, that's our tried and true validation video. And many of you may have already seen it, but I'd love to just bring that up because it's a great example. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about common factors for success. So we're thinking about groups and DBT programs generally, and what sort of leads to success. So there is a clinical tool called the DBT Program Fidelity Checklist that can be used to evaluate the extent to which a program is structured adherently. And per this tool, programs that exceed the threshold of fidelity related to groups specifically, so we're thinking about just the group sort of subscale, these programs are offering weekly DBT skills training in a systematic way, which means that they're teaching the standard DBT skills modules. And then they are also conducting group in a psychoeducational format, which focuses on teaching new skills and assigning and reviewing skills practice and homework. So two kind of considerations. I wanted to share that there's been research out of Canada, and so this is the next bullet point, that looks a little bit more at clinician and programmatic factors. So yes, we're thinking about groups, but also DBT programs more generally, which then of course ties back to groups. And in the study, they found that the following 3 clinician factors contribute to sustainable and successful DBT programs. So systematic supports are things like administrators' familiarity with DBT, their time and financial commitment to DBT programs within agencies, and providing autonomy to clinicians. Clinician commitment and buy-in looks like the long-term commitment of clinicians. Do clinicians believe in and embrace DBT? And are clinicians able to apply DBT in their own lives? And then finally, team cohesiveness includes things like support and respect and trust among team members, and the opportunity to share non-judgmental feedback. Hibbs and colleagues, so the third bullet point, they looked into client perceived treatment credibility, which included things like helpfulness, acceptability, and the extent to which group met their needs. So specifically looking at groups, and they found that higher ratings of treatment credibility that was associated with greater improvements in most symptomology measures. And then finally, I'm excited to share that there is a new metric in development and it's being put together by California CBT, and it's a coding adherence scale for group. And not only is it exciting, at least to me, because it encourages some parameters for groups, but more than that, there is a subscale that measures diversity considerations. And this is something we're going to talk a little bit about in a moment when we think about who's in the room. But the subscale looks at if leaders are showing cultural humility, which includes things like being respectful, open-minded, asking questions when uncertain, and if leaders are addressing diversity considerations. So before we get into who's in the room, we're going to have one more Slido question. And what are some challenges that you all face with group engagement? Feel free to chat in, or it looks like at least one person's typing in the Slido. Yeah. Client apathy. Yeah. Interest and commitment. So flexibility, varied levels of extroversion, introversion. In the chat, I'm also seeing keeping people on task, vulnerability, social anxiety, too anxious to engage, completing homework, personality conflicts, the room setup and access to audiovisual, trauma history coming into group, completing homework, disrupting jokes, Okay, in teen group, they wait for others to respond first and then seem hesitant after sharing, checking for reactions, like a lot of looking to peers, it sounds like. Lower willingness in social dynamics. Oh, hybrid groups. Yeah, that can be really complicated, especially if there's one person present trying to manage that. Thanks. We'll keep these challenges in consideration as we move forward in our presentation. Thank you guys for participating. And if you want to see some of what other people have responded or what other participants have shared, you can check that out in the Slido app, and you can even upvote certain things. So who's in the room? All right, so in the next slide, please, Kimberly, thank you. we're going to think about some considerations for inclusive groups. All right. And the next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I wanted to bring this up because I believe safety and respect are preconditions for some of the fun and openness and expression that we kind of got at when we were talking about engagement in groups. So Kimberly Crenshaw has identified is like the leading scholar on the term or on the idea of intersectionality, which is basically how we describe the complex interplay of interlocking systems of power and how those affect individuals who are most marginalized in our society. Yeah, and I'm seeing someone just learned about intersectionality in their class. So the seminal example is that discrimination against Black women is something more complicated than misogyny and racism. And you can kind of read a little bit more about intersectionality in the graphic. I bring this up in part because yes, we need to consider identities, and being part of or being a culturally humble practitioner involves doing the work to understand who our clients are and what power dynamics are at play. I think that by better understanding our clients and their identities can bring a lot of richness to the room or to the virtual room. And I think our groups can be more robust when we're considering intersectionality. So the next part of the presentation is a little bit of a call to action to do that work, to be a culturally humble practitioner and learn about our clients and the various facets of their identities. I'm reminded of the identity iceberg, which some of you may have seen, basically, where at the top we have parts of an identity that we can see, and that's just above the surface, but then below, there are so many other components to identity that maybe we can't see. And then secondly, the next part of the presentation, I'm hoping to spark a little bit of interest. We're going to be skimming the surface on some of the literature about how to create more culturally responsive and identity affirming groups. There's a lot more out there and a lot more research that's needed. So keep that in mind. This is just skimming the surface on this topic. All right. So I wanted to start off by just describing a study that Marsha Linehan was actually a part of, in which Marsha Linehan identified or determined that several American Indian, and that's the term that this study uses, American Indian traditional practices, including sweat lodges, talking circles, and smudging, met the mindfulness manualized goals of DBT, and therefore could be incorporated into manualized treatment. So in this study, traditional mindfulness practices were performed by a medicine man or spiritual counselor from a local tribe who also received training in DBT. And the study found that 96% of the 102 participants, and the participants were adolescents at a residential treatment center, I believe in Arizona. They were considered recovering or improving at the time of discharge after having completed the DBT program with its cultural adaptations. None of the treated individuals deteriorated over the time of treatment. I wanted to note that there's no control group or randomized clinical trial, so placebo effect or passage of time couldn't be ruled out. Though this was some promising research in culturally attuned DBT with a population that has some of the highest suicide risks of all ethnic and racial groups in our country. Next, O'Grady and colleagues more recently conducted a systematic review of 18 studies that implemented cultural adaptations to DBT, and they offered 7 clinical recommendations for cultural adaptations to DBT, which are outlined below. but I'll just provide a few examples. So first, making an effort to deliver specifically written materials in our clients' native languages. Second, discussing identity-based prejudice such as racism, discrimination, acculturative stress, historical and intergenerational trauma when we're introducing the biosocial theory. Third, providing psychoeducation and tools for clients to cope with cultural stigma. So an example that they provided was holding treatments in culturally supportive locales such as religious centers or schools. They also described framing DBT skills as applicable regardless of meeting criteria for mental illness. Fourth, and I was a little bit surprised when I saw this, use flexibility with infidelity with the diary card. What does that mean? So they actually suggested some strategies, including pictorial representations instead of using words or numeric ratings for low literacy clients, or tracking somatic symptoms instead of, or in addition to, emotions and urges. A creative idea that one study brought in was using the Mexican bingo rewards card, or La Loteria, which some of you may have seen, to create a game in which clients with the best diary card compliance received an award. Fifth, increasing attention to cultural context in the interpersonal effectiveness module. They had a lot to say here and some really interesting ideas, I think. So I would recommend checking out this publication yourselves. But some ideas included within interpersonal effectiveness, exploring interpersonal norms within a culture. So an example they got into was, could assertiveness skills cause clients harm if they're living within a patriarchal society? Something to think about. And again, there's a lot more there. Six, adopt additional components into DBT teams. So things like an anti-racist consultation to the environment agreement. And there's language around that in the study. And then finally, advocating for increased training of clinicians from different cultural contexts. All right. Identity affirming DBT. And there's a lot being published out there right now about this, but I wanted to just bring our attention to Chang and Cohen's proposed 5 clinical recommendations for doing affirmative DBT with LGBTQ clients. So they recommend incorporating the minority stress model. And they actually have, Cohen, I believe, created a handout looking at stressors unique to sexual minorities, including rejection, sensitivity, internalized stigma, and sexual orientation concealment. So that can be used as a tool. Amplify resilience. This is really taking a strengths-based approach. Centering the LGBTQ plus experience. So asking about gender identity, sexual orientation, and pronouns, not assuming and not opposing values of dominating cultures. Advocating and engaging in consultation to the environment. So similar to the anti-racist consultation to the environment, we're thinking about Linehan's suggestion that environmental intervention might be appropriate when the problem is a powerful environment. So what can we as clinicians do? And they suggested things like advocate for all gender bathrooms, or respond when group members express heterosexist or cis-sexist sentiments. Finally, check yourself. So we all are fallible and contribute to oppressive structures. So asking for feedback, asking clients, what have I missed? What can I do to be a more effective therapist for you? Apologizing without centering yourself if you misstep. Again, recommendations. And then I wanted to share that, again, there's a lot out there right now, but Brooke and colleagues really recently proposed some neurodiversity affirming guidelines for autistic clients. And we wanted to mention that autistic clients was their language, and we were assuming there might be some like person-centered decision-making around this. And we could have a whole conversation on that, but We won't go into that today. And again, there's a lot more out there. I wanted to also just note that the Stanford Adult DBT program is doing some qualitative research on transgender and gender non-binary affirmative groups, and they're finding that by formally designating a skills group as LGBTQ affirming, they're getting feedback that that is creating a sense of safety, not only for LGBTQ participants, but for other oppressed minority groups. All right, next slide, please, Kimberly.
Yeah, I was just in the chat about to say to Bria's comment, if you email me, there is a DBT group design for LGBTQ plus clients that they presented their structure and different skills approach at ISIT DBT this year. So if you email me, my email is at the end of the presentation and I will send it to you. Okay, so speaking of presenting things in client's native language, as a Black woman whose, I guess my only language is English, except if you ask certain people, I have different ways of communication based on different aspects of my intersectionality, which I've talked about in other presentations. And so while we're on the topic, would love people to think expansively on how we present things in clients' native language. I'm wondering if I click on this, if it will go to the link. We're having adventures in, I'm actually going to stop share and bring it up to you. For the person who said earlier, someone's mic is unmuted. It was me and my microphone on my computer. We're not going to comment on the circumstances that brought TikTok back, but whatever, we know that TikTok is back now, and so great. All of that learning that we did does not have to be lost. Here is an example of a culturally relevant meditation that may work for some clients. But anyway, so is an example of using different language strategies. We've got African American vernacular, we've got references to divine, we've got just the flow of conversation from a different cultural perspective. And so if you have people in your DBT groups, you know, as much as we all love the language of the manual, sometimes that is just not people's first language of how they understand things. So that's important to consider. Okay. Going back to the presentation. All right. So I'm going to go over some other developmental considerations that you might think about when leading skills groups. So there's another Slido. So how do y'all think people change as they age? Go on and participate in the poll. There's so many ways, no wrong answers. Well, I'm not formulating possibilities of wrong answers at this time. Less flexible. This is interesting. Values change. They do as people age. More or less inhibited. More experiences. In the chat, some people are slower when physical. Oh, yeah. Sore all the listen. Somebody went into their body with that one. Sore all the time. Wisdom with age. Activities of interest change. Somebody who's lived longer mean that they have more life experience, more set in their ways. Confidence evolves. Our brain develops, or the way we communicate. Cognitive decline, more open or closed off. Harder to keep up with change. Interesting. Rooted in views. Anxious about change. That may be in part due to just learning experiences. Age. Yeah, certainly loneliness is something that happens to people as they age and their social circles change. crystallized intelligence. Okay. I love it. Thank you all for participating. They get more patient. I can only hope, as somebody who is, I don't know what you call me. Is it quarter life? I hope. I know. I'm 36. It's approaching mid. Man. Engage and play less. This is vital consideration. Thank you for that one. We'll take one. This last participant will take care less about again, that's going to be one that I hope for. Care less about the judgment of others. Put in the chat how old you have to be before that one happens. That is not a characteristic of my midlife. Okay, here are some of the ideas that I generated. A lot of you mentioned cognitive capacity changes as we age, in some ways that are predictable, some ways that are less so. Thank you, Rhonda. The ability for abstraction changes. So, young kids are still learning the difference between concrete and abstract thought. So they depend a lot on what they see in front of them. Even teenagers who we like to think have it all figured out. Well, I don't know if anybody thinks that teenagers have it all figured out. But sometimes when we talk to them, we do act as though they have it figured out. But their capacity for abstract thinking is still forming, and their prefrontal cortex, the part of their brains that allow them to make decisions, to be able to plan, are still forming. That's why I say that DBT skills are good for any teenager, because it will work right alongside their brain development. But that is what's happening. Somebody mentioned fluid versus crystallized reasoning, which is super good. I learned a sad fact that when you're younger, you have more fluid reasoning capacity. So it's the time of life when people are more creative. They can think about a lot of different solutions. You're also building crystallized knowledge, which is more about what you know, what you learn, your ability to then reflect back on that experience to make decisions. So at about the age of 40, your ability to expand on your fluid reasoning declines, and your dependence on crystallized knowledge increases. And so this is one of the reasons why we say that people increase in wisdom as they age, but they're not necessarily increasing in creativity. If you are sad about this and are rebelling, think about most music artists that we like had their peak between the ages of 25 and 35, and then if they made music after that, even Michael Jackson, it was less popular. And so this is a reality of development that we need to consider when we have different ages in group. But it does mean that we can pull on different aspects of what's going to be relevant as people age. People also mention that your physical ability changes. So while I like to do dance mindfulness, it may not work in my adult group as well as it works in my kid or adolescent group. And as physical ability changes, sometimes our self-consciousness about that will change as well. And when we're trying to facilitate an environment where everybody can interact, it's good to think about ways to adapt activity, ways to have a universal design for learning so that everybody can access the things that you're doing. But it doesn't mean that we want to limit it and not be active at all during group because of varying ability levels. We've also got people going through various identity development stages. So racial identity development, queer identity development, just identity development in Ericksonian stages. So people's attention to different aspects of their identity will change. Their intersectionality definition will change. The central task of life will change. And so all of that influences what kind of stories are relevant, what kind of role plays are going to have most impact, if we're thinking about what's happening in people's identity development. Okay. So I want to do a practice with engaging different levels of understanding. So for this, I'm going to take someone from the audience, but I'm realizing that I have so much self-consciousness about this webinar format that I want to make sure that I know how to do this. This whole time I have observed so much judgment about this. I'm remembering a grad school classmate that's like, psychologists are the worst at technology, and just feeling super awkward about all I'm having to judge. Anyway, we're gonna bring Emma. Are you there? Raise your hand if you're there. It's your turn. You're up. We're gonna try this real quick. Now, this is not to bias our employees here, but we are told that those are the only people we can consent to having participate in this way today. So if you want to change that, put that in your feedback at the end of the presentation so we can figure it out. But I would love to have, though I love the people I work with, would love to have all of you in my extended work family participate. But we want your permission to do so. Hello, Emma. I'm going to see
Hello.
if I can go back to the screen. We're going to have you do an activity. Hopefully it is painless. Okay. So, as an example of engaging different levels, you guys. Hold on. You know, my thing is doing that thing where when I was in full screen sharing the presentation, then my presentation disappeared. So I bring it back, and then I'm doing the share, and then I'm starting it from here. Okay. So Emma, and everybody in the audience can think of a story and practice to yourself while we're doing it together. All right, so Emma, just think of a story, not like a super long story, but one that is, I think probably all of your stories are worth sharing, but one that's got some juice for this audience and for our home study audience later on. Think of a story that you're willing to share.
Is it a story about myself or?
Can be about anything.
Okay.
Do you have a story in mind that you could share in 60 to 90 seconds? Okay, sweet. I want you to go ahead and tell us the story, actually.
Okay. I did not prep for this, so y'all are getting the unfiltered. I'm going to tell the story of how I got my cat. My cat's name is Bluette, and I love her with every fiber of my being. But she was not supposed to be my cat. I found out that I was able to foster cats and reached out to a shelter that was about 2 hours away from me. And they were like, we have this one cat, like she really needs to be socialized. And I was like, great, I don't want like a small girl cat. She is a small girl cat. I want a big boy cat, so I won't keep her. So I drive 2 hours in a blizzard, and which is not at all my thing, but I love cats so much. So I was like, I've got this cat. And she comes right up to me. She screams the entire 2 hours home. And within, I think, 3 days, I was like, oh, this is my cat. The end.
That sounds familiar from an experience I had approximately 12 years ago. Anyway, wonderful. It was gripped. You had me out the blizzard. Okay, thank you for telling us the story. Now tell it again as though you were telling it to your mom.
This is great because I actually did have to do this. So, Mom, I got a call from the shelter and they just really, really need someone to help with this cat. Like, no one else can help her. And so I'm gonna go do it, but it's not gonna be a big deal. Um, and then like fast forward to the realization, like, hey mom, so like turns out this cat is actually perfect, and it's actually like really, really good for my mental health to have this cat. And so I've been thinking about it, and it was a really, really thoughtful decision, but I think I'm gonna end up adopting her.
I'm into it. Okay. You've told it to strangers. Great. Tell a story like you were telling it to your boss. Not the boss you have here, maybe. Some other boss.
Yeah, yeah, I gotcha. Hey boss, yeah, over the weekend I ended up getting to foster this cat. It's been super fun. I'm really enjoying it.
Okay. 6-year-old.
Do you guys like cats? I I have this cat who is just this little 6-pound kitty. She's full grown. And she came into my house because one day I got a call that she really needed someone. And even though there's a blizzard, I drove through the night to get her. And she is just the best. Do you want to see a picture?
I'm 6 now. Uh, a 12-year-old with ADHD. Was not thinking of anyone in particular when I wrote this. Go ahead.
Hey, do you want to see a picture of my cat? Look, yeah, I wasn't originally going to keep her, but I adopted her after she lived in my house for a little bit, and we just decided we were the best. Do you have any cats?
I'm so
This
into
is
it.
putting my acting skills to the test.
Groups be doing that. 37-year-old adult who recently has been stressed.
Oh man, I just hear how stressed you've been. You know, if you like, do you have anything in your life where you're able to just get some comfort? I know for me, when I'm really stressed, I have this cat who originally wasn't even supposed to be my cat. I was just gonna foster her, but she is just the best and she always gives me comfort.
Emma, bravo. You're done. You're just gonna have to stay there for a minute though, because I don't know how to dismiss you like super quickly. That's fine. Oh wait, no, I do. Thank you for or maybe you can reflect on this while you're here. And anybody else can reflect in the chat as well. But what did you all notice in terms of like how the story changed based on the different people that she was telling this to? Emma, what did you notice?
I think what I noticed was like maybe length even felt like it varied when I was thinking about who I was talking to. Um, and then I was trying to change my voice a little bit depending on like the 6-year-old versus the 70s or 37-year-old. I was trying to be like show up with a little bit less energy.
I'm into it. I'm into it. What else did people notice? You have a lot of positive judgments in the chat. Man, applause. Killing it. Minor in theater. They're asking if you have. Oh, wait. Let me go back real quick. Um, one of the. Ay, geez. Okay. So, one of the things that I noticed is like when you were telling it to your mom, there was a lot of persuasive language, an omission of the crying. Actually, I don't know if you told anybody about the crying, which is interesting. You told us. Uh, when you were telling it to a supervisor, I observed it as being like a pretty fact based delivery. Like, this is what I did, this is what you need to know. Kind of limited in the aspect of most people's supervisory relationships, unless you're a therapist or whatever. I don't know. Maybe even with your therapist supervisor. 6-year-old, I noticed that you lean close. Started with a question. Uh, with the 12-year-old, started with the picture first. With the 37-year-old, started with a sigh of listen, I got a cat. Because it is kind of awkward to talk to somebody about what's going on with you if you know that they have been stressed. But guess what? That's what we're doing every time we lead a skills group. We're coming into a situation where people have been dealing with a lot of things, and we're coming to them. Maybe we're dealing with a lot of things and maybe we aren't. But how do we best bridge that when people may be in distress? Anybody else in the audience notice things that they want to put in the chat? I have it up now, so I'll read it. Also think about how some or all of these engagement strategies might just be good to switch into anyway, regardless of who you're talking to. Like when you said, do you want to see a picture to the 6-year-old? I'm like, yeah, I want to see a picture. Show it to me. Maybe because I'm a 6-year-old in my heart. Somebody said that there's a difference in the details that were shared, which is true. So some of it is going to be relevant to a 6-year-old. The love part, the connection part, the animal part. An animal exists, but maybe to help you know that it exists, I'm going to show you a picture of it. Like with the adult who's been stressed, you're emphasizing potential for connection with your mother. You're emphasizing like your strength in decision making potentially, so it doesn't get questioned. So there's so many things that you do when you're engaging different people. And so when you're in a skills group, we're engaging different people all the time. And so how are we switching up the presentation of what we're doing based on who the listener is? Okay, final applause for Emma. Bye-bye, thank you, so great. All right, I'm doing it, man. Okay, so we could also engage different learning styles. One example of this that I pulled was this neurodivergent friendly workbook of DBT skills. Look how brightly colored it is. What I like about this manual, though we do teach to the Linehan model, and we take a lot of stock in being an adherent DBT program here, but part of adherence, as Rosa was talking about earlier, is being able to be flexible when it's called for, employing the mindfulness strategy of doing what works. And so sometimes what works for people who have neurodivergent learning styles is variation in the ways that things are presented. So this workbook does cover most, if not all, of the skills that are in a standard program, but they change the order of things in a way that makes it make more sense to a neurodivergent brain. There's more visuals, there's more brightly colored things, variations in shapes, and an emphasis on changing some of the jargony language about DBT to something that's more relatable, that connects it to the importance of self-care, which is not really a word that's specifically used in any skill. And there's a lot of talk about managing vulnerabilities, because that is such a big thing for neurodivergent people. If you're already going to be having difficulty with attention, gotta take care of your sleep, you gotta be on top of routines. And so this is kind of central to that learning style. Great, I'm so glad, Bria. All right, so I want to know, before we head into more role plays, we listen and don't judge, what is your least favorite skill to teach? I know that we have new learners here, and so maybe you don't know any and you'd like to hear about anything. Maybe there's just one you heard about and you'd like to see some skills applied. But I am one for irreverence when talking about DBT related topics, so I love grime. So tell me what you do not like. Model of emotions. Okay, that's a great. What else do we not like? Oh yeah, the word cloud. Oh, positive and negative reinforcement. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Improve the moment too simple. Tip, I'm interested in this one. Somebody tell me why they don't like tip. Raise your hand and I can make it so you can speak. I need to understand this one. That's a real request. I think we can do that. Okay, I'm gonna find you. Oh, it's Aaliyah. I think can we bring her on? I don't know. That's a past friend. All right. Say something, Aaliyah. What's your beef?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I think that it's hard because clients can feel like it's silly. So, like when emotions are high and things are hard, it's like feels like just a silly thing to tell them to do. So it's not always well received. So it's not my favorite skill to teach because it's a more simple one and it's not like a broad, super in-depth, detailed skill that's like, oh, here's a big thing to address your big problem, I think is where it can feel like there's a mismatch sometimes.
Yeah, it seems like a simple solution to a complex problem.
Mm.
And it is a silly one because look, I just got my hair done a couple of days ago. My willingness to put my face in water to model for a client is drastically decreased right now. Thank you, Aaliyah. It's so good to hear your voice by the by. Yay. Okay. Wait, disable talking. Is that how I do it? Okay. Improve the moment to simple model of emotions. If I can handle switching over to different things, I can show you how I teach it. But yeah, somebody doesn't like Dear Man. I also want to hear that one kind of, but we'll save that one for meeting me outside. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you something that I learned as a postdoc that's had a lot of relevance in how I think about controlling the flow of group. In that group adherence measure that Rosa mentioned, it talks about how one of the hallmarks of effective teaching is maintaining control of the group while also being strategic about flow and structure of information. I'm gonna find, actually, yeah, I found it. I'll tell you later. It's a lot of technology to juggle between. So the idea of Kolb's experiential learning theory basically says that most of us have at least one dominant learning style that we are drawn to in order to get the information in there. Some of us like to think about things. Some of us like to think about things while we watch somebody do them. Some of us like to try things out. So I'm one of those people. I really do not enjoy trial and error in real life. I want to trial and error it before I have to err in public, if you can believe it. And so trying something for the first time and making mistakes is really difficult for me. It's why I probably never will try skiing or something like that. And then some of us just like to do it. We just like to try it, see what happens. You're just going to send it. And so when we're thinking about how we teach people things, we want to then incorporate the different predominant modes of learning into different activities that we incorporate in our teaching. And so the different styles have been combined into learning modes, in a sense, that you can enter in and out of when you are teaching. So diverging combines feeling and watching. So it's a little bit of observation and a little bit of how you feel. Assimilating is when you think about something while you watch it. Converging is thinking about something while you're doing it. So that's more like the practice round. And then feeling and doing is when you're actually putting something into practice. Okay, so oh, wait a minute. I do want to show you this, but I also want to check something. So here's an example of divergent strategies. Storytelling is a way for people to be, actually, no, I'm going to go to this slide because this is the slide I had it right. So assimilating styles are ones who respond well to video, storytelling, brainstorming, hearing from other people, and reading from the manual. I know, like, maybe everybody who has led groups before has been in where they're like, hey, read this section from the manual just because I'm tired of reading it, but it actually does have purpose in learning. It's kind of like when, I don't know if people have gone to the fair. I try to avoid the building that has the people with the massage chairs in them and like the Usborne books, the candles. It's like the Salem booth. Because once they talk to you, you know they got you on sub $200 straightening iron that you barely use on your hair. At any rate, when somebody is trying to sell you something, one of the big tactics that they will use is to put it in your hand. And they'll use something random too. They'll be like, here, check the ingredients on this thing. And then they'll hand it to you and you've already taken it because we've all been socialized to be nice. And then when you read the ingredients, you are hooked. Oh, it's natural ingredients. This isn't going to hurt the environment. It's already pulling on values that you think are important, and that is why they put it in your hand. So having group participants read something does a similar thing, especially to your people who you think will have low engagement. Just tell them to read stuff. And then you can move into a divergent strategy of asking them questions about how they like, or it's still assimilating actually, to think about how they feel when they hear this certain thing. Divergent examples are working in groups, around the room discussions, emotional reflections. Examples of converging are reading practice simulations or situations from other people, mentally rehearsing doing something like our Copahead skill, having practice writing scripts. So like for Dear Man, this is a popular strategy to write out the Dear Man script that you would use before you try it. Having fake role plays in unreasonable situations. Okay, good. Let me know if I need to like drastically repeat anything. But then how would you know? And then accommodating strategies are when you are getting into real life situations that you're trying out, rehearsal, and dragging out behavior. So I wanted to give this example of assimilation. Don't do the quiz yet. Don't do the quiz yet. I just gotta go back in the slides. Oy. 1 second. Okay. So this is an example of a video that I saved. I would suggest that everybody start paying attention to like things they watch on TV. What TV, you say? I'm a busy therapist and I don't have time for things like that. I am about the noble pursuit of preventing people from dying. Well, to do that, you have to live, or else we don't have any other examples to draw upon. So build a video library of things that you see that remind you of skills that people can employ. So one day I saw this and I saved it because I thought it would be a good intro to interpersonal effectiveness skills. So I'm curious, what kind of interpersonal strategies do you see this woman in putting into place? And even if you don't know the DBT language for it, just put what you see, what you notice happening. Yeah, so it's a broken record. We're gonna when somebody comes to our door, we're gonna say, "How can I help you?" She probably said that about 5 times in 2 minutes. There's also a little bit of, if I were in the same position, I probably would be experiencing, well, y'all tell me, what would you be experiencing? I already feel my armpits kind of getting the tingle. Bria had put in the chat that we can't observe the cameraman's inner state, so we can't observe his intentions, but he did have behavior that seemed to be patronizing. He was pushing on this issue of why did you let this criminal in the door? But this person, the woman, the owner of the daycare, did not engage. She just kept broken record on the thing, and she also stuck to her values. She's like, it's a business. We're going to open the door for people who could welcome us, which could even be like a relationship strategy for somebody else watching. So, yeah, mindfulness was on point with Miss Terry. Okay, so if you see stuff like that on the news, if you see stuff like that in TV shows that you watch, be thinking about, hey, like maybe this would make sense as an example of that to show someone. I love trifling news clips myself. Okay. Oh, she's continuing. Okay. All right. Here's another example. Oh, Mackenzie, join the quiz. Wait, let me go back and set it up again. When I hit the slide, it did it by accident, but it was a question of what is the standard length of DBT groups, which I mentioned in a flash earlier on. And when I bring the quiz up, we can see if you all remember. Wait, you're putting names, and I'm going to just start the chat. But thank you for putting your names. Y'all are in it. Okay. Untitled quiz. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. I think I've got deactivate. It's not going to work now because I started it, but oh wait, maybe it will work if I back it up. Anyway, I think somebody talked about the challenges of hybrid participation, and this is one of them. Ha! Here we go. Here's the quiz. Put it on. This is why I said I'm one of the people that likes to try things in abstract before I do them in front of people, but I did not try as many things as I could have for today. So thank you for your patience. Okay, vote in, vote in, vote in. Okay, I am gonna lock it at 20. Okay. Let's see. It was standardized at 2.5 hours. 80% of you are correct. As long as you want. That would be the flexible option. Thank you, Vicky. I do. Oh, wait. There was a leaderboard, and I've missed it. If you could practice with Slido prior to group, it's a great thing to get your hybrid people engaged. Something about not seeing my own face is throwing me off. But look, congratulations, Naomi. You were the fastest one to answer it. Look at the confetti. I'm already reinforced. Okay. So now we're going to get into role plays. If you've been in a presentation with me before, you may have seen a variation of this activity. So this is going to be a combination of doing, like feeling and doing, but also thinking and doing for whoever is participating. And so what I would like for you all to do briefly is generate a list of urges that are associated with each of these emotions for you. So we talked about how we don't like the model of emotions. The model of emotions is actually one of my favorite things now, and we'll go back to that in a second. But the model of emotions talks about how we can have different facial expressions, different interpretations associated with emotions, different urges, things you want to do, bodily changes, stuff like that. So focus on urges, but you can also put bodily sensations or thoughts or whatever that are associated with each of these emotions. Just write them down on a piece of paper. You don't need cards for today because only you need to keep up with it. I was telling Rosa I call this like opposite action Pokemon, but I've never played Pokemon before. And so I don't actually know if this is how Pokemon works. I think it is though. I get that you like play different whatever. Write down action urges for the different emotions. Okay. And while you're doing that, I want someone else who works at UCEBT currently who is willing to help to raise their hand so I can pull you in as a panelist. It will involve telling a story about a situation that maybe you did not handle as effectively as you would have liked to. Any of my UCEBT people? If not, then I am going to ask Rosa to do it because she said that she would. Okay, Rosa, do you have an example of a time, a situation that you have been in that you maybe could have handled more effectively? When you tell the story, also describe some of the emotion urges that you had when you were facing this situation. So everybody else in the audience, be listening and looking at what you wrote for your action urges associated with emotions that you feel, and just keep them in mind while Rosa shares her story. Okay, go. You ready, Rosa?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
All right.
Tell us.
Okay, the other day I have chickens at home and I went to the chicken coop, and the huge Home Depot bucket of water that's like many gallons, I guess, had been tilted a little bit to the side. And so instead of having a bucket full of water, we just had like an ice skating rink for the chickens. All of the water had kind of spilled out and was just frozen on the bottom of the coop. And I think I was pretty angry, angry and like kind of disgusted, thinking about, my first line of thought is like, okay, I need to go get my my hair blow dryer and just like stand here for hours probably to melt this ice so that my chickens' feet don't freeze and fall off. And then I started texting my partner who had been responsible for putting the water in. And yeah, that's where probably some of the anger came out in my snappy text.
Snappy text. Do you have any more details about what was happening while you sent the text or like before you sent the text? Yeah, give us more on there.
Just lots of thoughts of like, how am I gonna fix this? I jumped to like, this can't be fixed. We're just gonna have to leave this ice in the chicken coop all winter. I felt pretty helpless there because the blow dryer is not really a reasonable solution. And yeah, just probably a little bit of sadness that maybe my chicken had cold feet overnight, and were maybe suffering.
Low key, I kind of like the description of a ice skating rink for the chickens. Then now that you're talking about their little feeties being frozen, then yeah, I'm kind of with you. Okay, so what I heard was that like the situation is you came in, you saw the water tipped over into the chicken area, and there's all this ice where your chickens are, and that you didn't say like how you reacted to this per se, like what happened in your body.
It's a good question. Probably got a little like hot temperature change. That tends to happen when I'm irritable. Hot, and my brow probably went like this, like, ugh. I probably let out a sigh of frustration. I might have also like became sort of rigid and like fast. I don't think I like slammed anything, but I might have become a little bit of aggressive with my body, which is sort of like me.
Okay, so chicken ice skating rink, get hot, furrow brow,
Yeah.
sigh. You go and you get a hair dryer. I kind of would have liked to see this. Try to melt it with a hair dryer.
I did do that. I ended up just texting and saying, you have to
Okay, you have the urge to go get a hair dryer.
get a hair dryer.
And then instead you texted your husband in a snappy way. Okay, great. So for the people in the audience, hopefully you were generating some action urges that you experience when you have an emotion. And so if you have been doing that, I want you to write in the chat which of the ones that you have might be the opposite of what Rosa did or what her urges were. So again, she said for a brow, a hot temperature, like rushing to solutions that were impractical or ineffective, snappy text to her life partner. So does anybody have an action urge set that they wrote down that sounds like the opposite of those things? Use the chat.
And please chat to everyone. Sometimes
Oh yeah, chat to everyone for sure. Because you may be doing it, but I don't be seeing it.
help me out, people. What could I do differently?
Or if you just want to give a suggestion of like what your opposite action urge is, you can also raise your hand and you can say it aloud. Or maybe we all think that this was the effective response to your chicken situation. Does anybody have something that they wrote down that they feel like is the opposite of those things? So pausing before response. Opposite action behaviors. It could have been stop, deep breath, laughing, a gentle approach to your partner, breathing. Any other ideas? So, walking away from the situation, there is a lot of approach behavior. Robin's chickens love ice. Do they like eating it? Okay, that's cool. I mean, I also like eating ice, so that's fine. We're all part dinosaur. Leah says, do some belly breathing approach with curiosity. Yeah, like, many of us would panic, except for Robin, apparently, if we saw our little chickadees in ice. Then so we're suggesting, maybe asking partner if he knows what happened, and then describing what you found. Very interesting. All right. So Rosa, do you want to try one of those things on out for size in your mind if you had incorporated one of those solutions? What maybe would have happened differently?
I'm imagining myself like opening the coop. I saw icicles first. That was the first warning sign. So that was strange. But then I opened the big door to this beautiful coop that my partner made, and it's lovely. And I think had I taken a deep breath as I see the Home Depot bucket like on it, sort of on its side. Let's see. I might have ideally, closed the door and walked inside and done a little bit of stop before before jumping to conclusions and jumping to problem solving, ineffective problem solving. So I think the deep breath prep and stop intentionally, reminding myself to stop and proceed mindfully.
As a good thing that you notice that like using one skill may lead to the use of other skills, because even now in the retelling of it, doing a breath before trying it again, you're like, I opened the door of this beautiful coop that my partner built, where before you were sending him a snappy text. Perspective. Thank you, Rosa, for your participation and your opposite actioning of your own urges to not do role plays today. So how this would work in person, because I know that we are all socialized to listen intently to a screen, and so this is probably a better group activity. But how the Pokemon part of it works and how this incorporates different co-learning styles is that Rosa is in a more active mode of concretely doing something, but she's also touching different modes of feeling and doing by telling her own story about what's happening. Then, if each group member has generated a list, and why I use cards is because I want something physical to know that they've done it, and they hold it in their hands so that they know that they've done it. Engagement strategy. If you're in a group members can then tag in for Rosa and play what they think their opposite urge would be to her urge. Now, if you remember, the skill for opposite action does not require that you know how you feel when you do opposite action. It helps us, and of course we name it readily because we're all adults and like we got bad grades if we couldn't, or whatever the reasoning is. However, people in skills group may have differing abilities to name emotions, especially in moments of crisis. And so opposite action helps us to attend to urges alone and then respond by opposite action urges alone. And then what linking it to an emotion in written form does is allows people to see that a lot of times the opposite action to the emotion you felt reflects the actions of the emotion that would have been more effective to employ in the moment. So for me, I didn't do the action urges because I'm facilitating. But one of the things that I notice when I feel love, for example, is that I have more openness to situations. I have more curiosity. I have relaxed posture. And I am not in a rush to interpret things when I'm acting out of the emotion of love, for example. So if Rosa loves her chickadees and loves her partner, a lot of the things that you all named are more in this category of love and regard. And that might be a more effective approach or effective emotion for caring for people than anger is. Anger is a primarily protective emotion that serves to care for self at the expense of others. And so when you're trying to deepen knowledge with group members, you can pull those things out. But for opposite action, the only thing that is needed is the urges. So writing out the urges helps people to say, oh yeah, it works no matter if you're thinking about changing emotion to emotion, or if I'm only able to access action urge to action urge. Anger isn't a negative emotion. It isn't always at the expense of others. But in this case, Rosa identified that anger was not the effective emotion that she wanted to use. And so we're not negatively evaluating anger as like a never use, but we're saying anger, the action urges associated with anger did not probably bring out the effect that she wanted. Because first of all, where are the chickens in this? Is the ice thawed? Is her partner soothed? Are her own needs met? Because the need was to get the chickens out of the ice. And so if none of those things are being served, then in this situation, anger is not the effective emotion. But other times, Rosa was talking about anger and disgust. One time that I felt a lot of anger and disgust was in the pandemic in reaction to different things on the news, like the murder of George Floyd, things like that. So anger and disgust are things that tell me what my wise mind values are and how I feel when someone violates them. And so I want that in my life to drive things like activism and pro-social choices. And so in some cases, or in that case, then anger and disgust are effective emotions to act upon. Where they were less effective for me is where I would not want to, I had the urge to not leave my house or not talk to people because I didn't want to hear them say things that would violate my wise mind values, which yes, did protect me, but it also shielded me from a lot of good that people could have said at that time, or a lot of validation that people could have provided. And so always in DBT, we're looking at doing what works. We're also teaching people to look at emotions non-judgmentally. We're just trying to figure out what's going to be effective in the situation that we're in. So hopefully that explanation makes sense. Somebody asked a long time ago if motivational interviewing could be considered DBT. I forget the phrasing of your question, but my answer is motivational interviewing is a third wave strategy just like DBT. And so I think motivational interviewing strategies work well in bringing out the abstract qualities of motivation that lead to change. And of course, in DBT, we are concerned with the balance of acceptance and change, much like motivational interviewing is. And so no anathemas in that way. I think that that is a great strategy. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is rehearsal and dragging out behavior in group. Oh wait, there's a question that I'll start to do. but it can bring about the chance to use it. Ask me, clarify it in the Q&A because I want to hear more about what you mean, Bria. Okay, rehearsal is important. So a couple months ago, I did this thing. Look at me. Looks great. It was a lot more work than I thought it would be to just stand up and give a talk to people. Although, if this talk is any indication, like, I'm glad to have had the practice. So, because I don't know, in any kind of talking situation, things can go well, and if you have, or things can go well and things cannot go well. And I don't know if there's people here, I know my people from work have heard me present before, and I tend to have a sort of ruminative style of speaking, which this particular speaking opportunity extinguished for that time. And so when I was learning this new thing, I rehearsed all the time. So here's me on the right, you can see me on a fake stage. There's like this circle taped down to emulate or imitate the circle that I would be standing on, so that I would know where to walk, how to put my hands, where, and I could also identify where on that circle I might would have the tendency to raise my shoulders, where I might would have the tendency to forget something. It incorporates the idea that many of us are familiar with regarding state-dependent learning. And in DBT groups, we want to be giving people opportunities for rehearsal, because we know they're coming in with a lot of different, things that are happening in their life. They're also coming in with a lot of strategies that they have learned to deal with those things. Most people will judge those as being ineffective, but it doesn't take away the fact that they are very learned responses. And in the moment of crisis, you're going to go on what's most learned. And so for any new behavior, it has to be practiced over and over, in as naturalistic a circumstance as possible. And so when we drag out behavior in group, one of the things that we do is, like when we're practicing a skill, we practice it more times than is necessary. So for all of y'all with beef on tip, it may mean that you got to drag that behavior out. Try more tip. Just keep doing it. I wonder if it would feel as silly if you repeated it that many times. To get as effective a broken record as Miss Terry had at the daycare, how much dragging out does that take in real life? In real life, and nobody gonna do what you say the first time that you throw a dear man at them. And so in group, we do our clients the most service by dragging out behaviors. I could use an example of that, but I see that we have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to stop share, see if we have any questions or things that people want to add in the chat. And I'm going to go hunt down my model of emotions thing. Aaliyah wants to clarify that she loves tips. She just likes teaching it less. And with that, I could align. Okay, so you said using motivational interviewing often brings up dysregulation. So I imagine using MI would bring up areas we could utilize DBT. With many things in DBT, we often don't know what we're stepping into. So yes, that's true. Ideally with motivational interviewing, we are drawing on times that the client or the person has been successful, that they've been able to accomplish something, use some combination of their desire or ability or like the need of what was going on in the situation to do the thing. And so sometimes the situation that needs to be changed is triggering, but what motivational interviewing is really useful for is like breaking things down into accessible steps that the person could say, oh yeah, I have been successful at that thing. Oh yeah, I have had the ability in the past to do it. Oh yeah, like if the reason is strong enough, like I for sure can like put certain skills into place. and if it becomes overwhelming, then yeah, we have a number of skills at our arsenal or in our arsenal that we can use in real time. See, this is what I think made group take 2.5 hours before. That people would not necessarily be like, oh, we got to stick to the script and only do this skill. If the situation calls for other skills, we can bring other skills in and then drag those out. Jordan has a question, or Joanna has a question, sorry. Love to know your favorite resources for finding creative and engaging ways to teach the skills. Probably my number one resource is going around other people and seeing what they do. So when I was working at HMHI, or I guess technically I still work at HMHI, they regularly do Just Dance for mindfulness, and I'm like, that's cool. I'm doing Just Dance. They're the ones that introduced me to the Fitness Marshall. And I'm like, I like the Fitness Marshall because they have adaptations for activity with the people that dance with him. And so it's a good participate mindfulness. I also get ideas from hearing about what is going on in clients' lives and figuring out how I can incorporate that into activity. So one of the most meaningful stories I heard from a client is that they were in a juvenile facility, and their DBT group facilitator set up a basketball game for the people that were in this facility. And they did that because they knew that a basketball game was a good opportunity to practice skills, especially in that population, because there would be times where people would get competitive, where people would get heated and maybe engage in ineffective action for the basketball court. And so they would set up this game and then say, okay, they would help them identify the moment that they needed to use skills. You stop in the moment by stopping the game, and then would drag out the behavior during the game of using the skill that would be more effective, and then the game would continue. So this client described that as one of the more why DBT has stuck with him, is because the leaders made an effort to make it relevant to their life. And so I think we have to know what's going on in clients' lives. It's the only reason I'm on TikTok, really, y'all. So I don't know how to use it. But now that I'm so old, if I weren't like on the grid somewhere, I wouldn't be able to relate. My life is different now. I have kids, and like I'm thinking about things from the parent side of things. Rose has put the DBT Bulletin in the chat as a great resource for like latest research, feasibility studies that people are doing. I think the DBT Bulletin is where I read something about group skills, or this thing that I was talking about, the LGBT groups, was once in the bulletin, or probably will be in the bulletin. There are through the ISIT DBT, which is like Society for something, teaching of DBT, like the International Society, whatever. They have a lot of resources. They have a listserv, different things shared back and forth. But yeah, so a lot of it is people. Are there any other questions? I see it's 12. Okay, if anybody wants my information for how to teach model of emotions, I can put it in the slide decks that so many people ask. But thank you for being with us today. Rosa, you have anything to add as people depart?
Yeah, related to resources, I love dbt.tools. It's not necessarily creative, but it's very simply laid out. I'll put it in the chat. And then I found DBT tools a great starting place. to then like individualize tools. And thank you all, and we'll send our emails. Let's see in the chat.